We've gotten many different iterations of the Air Nomad's tattoos across the Avatar universe, through different mediums, through different time periods, and completely different interpretations. And the more you look at them, the more you start to realize that each one of these arrow designs is actually telling its own story. And I'm not just talking about in canon, but I mean even in real-world depictions as well. Although the 2010 adaptation of Avatar is one of the most hated things in this franchise, we can't deny that the tattoo is actually super well done. The creators of that adaptation interpreted Aang's tattoos as something closer to the yantra-style markings found in Southeast Asia, leaning heavily into that sacred tattoo aesthetic. Meanwhile, in the Netflix adaptation, they went in a completely different direction. They chose a more fantastical approach, where they visually symbolize the Air Nomad's connection to air itself, rather than grounding it in real-world traditions. And in the animated universe, what most of us consider the true canonical version of Avatar, there's always been a long-standing debate surrounding these tattoos. Are the differences we see in Airbender tattoos throughout history actually meaningful, or is it simply just stylistic changes by different artists and teams over time, with the intention that in-universe they're all supposed to be the same thing? You'll notice in a lot of fan art, some fans will draw Aang with Rava as his tattoo, thinking that maybe in-universe it looks like that, which I will admit it does look pretty cool, and it's honestly a fun theory. And besides, there wasn't really a clear answer anyway, but now, after all of these years, we finally have the definitive answer. These tattoos are not just stylistic choices, they are intentional, and I think they are different for many different reasons. And the biggest piece of evidence for that comes from the first look at the new Avatar film, where we are introduced to Tagah, a character who clearly has Airbender tattoos, but ones that look completely different from anything we've seen before. So if all of these tattoos are not just different artists' interpretation of the same thing, and that means each version is clearly representing something specific. Now, just hear me out. This is gonna sound a little bit crazy, but I think each era of Airbender tattoos reflect what their people are going through at that point in history. And just look at them. The first Air Nomads were very peaceful, they had these simplistic tattoos. Then we have the villain of the new Avatar movie with this chaotic shift in tattoos. And then we have Aang from a mostly peaceful era with the more simplistic tattoos. And with our first look at Seven Havens, seeing our first airbending master, there's no tattoos here. Now, why is that? Don't worry, we're definitely going to be getting to that, because we're going to be breaking everything down and explaining the evolution of Airbenders. And the Airbenders we see during the era of Avatar 1 have tattoos that are surprisingly close to what we see later with Aang. But there are some very important differences. The biggest thing you'll notice is that while these tattoos follow the same general chi paths along the body, the ends of the arrows are not fully formed. They're simpler, less defined, and feel almost incomplete while looking at them, at least compared to the bold arrows that we're used to. Now, I don't think that's random at all. I think that the simplicity directly reflects the world they live in. These early Airbenders lived isolated lives on the backs of lion turtles. They had never interacted with the other elements, never experienced large conflicts like wars, and in many cases, never even seen people outside of their own. When Wan shows up, they're genuinely shocked and even afraid. This is a society that has only ever known peace. To show how early this really is, they're technically not even considered air nomads yet. And no, I don't mean nomad as in they don't travel. I mean, the co-creator Michael Dante DiMartino himself said that they were purposely careful about this. They didn't want to refer to them as air nomads yet, because at this point in history, those labels didn't exist. There's no such thing as firebenders, earthbenders, waterbenders, airbenders. Those distinctions would only come by later, once humanity would move off the lion turtles and start interacting with each other. Now, fast forward a few thousand years later, and this is where everything changes. Like I said earlier, at some point, humanity would be forced to move off the backs of lion turtles. Then different benders and nations would form, and then they'd begin to interact with each other. And once that happens, whether it's trade, curiosity, conflict, you already know what has to happen. Differences lead to tension, and tension eventually leads to fighting. And before you comment, yeah, I know there was fighting at the end of Wan's era. I'm not saying humanity took thousands of years to move off lion turtles and begin their fighting. I'm just saying something must have happened to where the airbenders get involved. And my theory is when they were finally forced to get involved, it changed them. Now, I'm only going off of what is publicly available information here. In the leak clip that went viral that we covered here on this channel, Aang states that his tattoos are ancient. And just by looking at them, they're chaotic. They're filled with different swirl patterns. They don't follow the clean, natural chakra paths that we see in the other air nomads. The arrowheads aren't fully there either. The markings look almost like a mix between the older style and the newer one. It almost feels like during this era, the Airbenders lost their way. Or else, why would the villain of the movie be an Airbender? Like, it doesn't really make sense. There's no way Aang is just fighting a good guy, right? He has to be from an eviler era, where airbending is no longer just about spiritual enlightenment and connecting with your element. It's been reshaped by whatever conflict the world is going through. And if that sounds like a big stretch, just keep watching because the pattern doesn't stop here. By the time we reach the era where the tattoos look like Aang's, and I know the era where the tattoos look like this is pretty wide, but something has clearly stabilized. The tattoos are now fully formed arrows, clean and consistent across all airbenders, perfectly aligned along the body's chakra paths. They've returned to the same general structure that we see in Wan's era, but now they're refined, which tells us something really important. The airbenders didn't just survive after whatever conflict that they went through in the past. They've rebuilt their philosophy. And this is where I'm gonna do what the Avatar novels love to do and just tie it together. Just get a random character and just make it work. If you've read the Avatar novels, you know what I'm talking about. So this is where Guru Lahima becomes incredibly important. If Tagah existed around 5000 BG and Guru Lahima is confirmed to be from 3829 BG, then he sits right in between that chaotic era and the structured one we see later. We know Lahima is one of the most spiritually advanced airbenders in history. He achieved light, something only possible through complete detachment, and even spent the last 40 years of his life never touching the ground. His teachings were so influential that they lasted for thousands of years after his death. So it's very possible that the arrows we see in this generation of airbenders isn't just tradition, it's the result of philosophical refinement over thousands of years. The chaotic expression from earlier eras gets replaced with a unified one that represents balance and enlightenment, and that system becomes a standard. Even after the Air Nomad genocide, Aang carries that tradition forward. He passes it to Tenzin, who then helps rebuild the airbenders during the Legend of Korra. But then everything changes again, because in Avatar 7 Havens, we are introduced to Jay, the next Avatar's airbending master, and he has no tattoos at all. Well, at least none that we can visibly see. I don't know what he's hiding under all that battle armor, uniform, whatever that may be. Despite being an airbending master, he has a full head of hair, no arrows, and the only visible markings that he has is not even on his body, but on his uniform. You'll see he has one very simple marking on his uniform, right on his chest, that shows off that he's an airbender. And this is where everything comes full circle. Jay comes from a world that has been devastated by a massive cataclysm. Not just the airbenders, but all benders have been nearly wiped out. Bending itself is now rare, and in some cases even dangerous, to the point where people are forced into military servitude if they're discovered to be able to bend any element. So what happens to airbenders' identity in a world like that? It disappears. Not completely, but enough to where it's no longer tied to tradition. Jay's lack of arrows is almost certainly not just a design choice. I believe it represents detachment, just not in a spiritual sense like Lahima taught, but rather in a cultural sense. Airbending is no longer who you are, it's just something that you can do. And we already saw a little bit of this taking effect during Korra, and that was before the whole world got destroyed. So imagine now, even the one marking that Jay has on his uniform is clearly just an identifier, rather than something that was formed through years of culture and traditions. And what's even more interesting about this whole situation is that the super early concept art for Jay that ended up leaking showed him, one, as a girl, but two, with a more futuristic arrow on his head. But we can see those were removed in the final design. Obviously that was done for an important reason. The arrow that we see on Aang, the other air nomads, you could put that arrow on a white piece of paper and everybody associates it with Avatar. If you're removing that arrow, it is done for a reason. When you take a look at the state of the Avatar world where benders are nearly extinct, people are shoved into these safe havens, there's no one left to carry on traditions, them removing that arrow was a deliberate decision to show just how far the world has fallen. Let me know what you guys think about all of this. Am I cooking with this theory or am I just crazy? I'm gonna let you guys decide that, so I'll be reading every single comment down below. So please, I'm super eager to see what you guys have to say and think of this video. Be sure to subscribe if you love Avatar, and I will see you guys super soon with another video.